Good evening, everyone. Good evening, and welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Destiny with Jamie Green. I'm beyond thrilled and honored tonight to have a very special guest with me. Most of you know my heart towards the impact of incarceration on families. That's, my thing right now. And so I am just excited to have with me Ms. Shelia Frazier Bruno. She is the author of a book entitled Wife After Prison, and she also has a nonprofit by the same name. Before we get into our conversation, I would like to thank this month's sponsor, the Heart and Soul Performing Arts. They are sponsoring our show this month, and they are doing a magnificent job in getting our youth off the street and involved in dance and so forth, and teaching them about teamwork and building self-esteem. And we appreciate them for sponsoring us this month. So I want to say there's so much I could say about Miss Shelia, but we don't want to take up a whole lot of time with an introduction. We want to get into the conversation. So, Miss Shelia, Wife After Prison is a very unique name. Where did you come up with that name?
Well, I didn't come up with it. It was something that God had dropped in my spirit in the midst of Kevin and I going through, this turbulent time in our relationship. And I was just crying out. And I heard God say, wife after prison. And I took it to Kevin and he said, life. I said, wife after prison. So I get asked that question a lot because it is a very unique name, and I get questions all of the time from people who say, "Is it just for wives? Is it just for wives?" And it's not. It's not. It's for anyone who has a loved one who is in the system. Mother, I get. Contacted by mothers and daughters and fathers. So it's just the title that he gave me, but it's not just for wives. But I will say that the majority of the people are, those who are in intimate relationships, fiancés and wives and girlfriends. Yeah, but this conversation is for everybody.
Everybody.
Everybody. Yeah,
And the thing
everybody.
is, when we have a loved one who is incarcerated, um, while they're in there, they're being impacted and changed and molded and going through things that we have no idea. I
Yeah,
talk to my son sometime and I'm like, when I hear stories and I hear things or watch TV or see a movie, and I'm like talking about some of the things that I've seen, and he said, Queen, that's sensationalized for television. He said, however, there are some things going on in here that I never would even tell you
that's
because
what
as a mother, you would not be able to handle it. And
yeah.
takes a strong person to deal with that every day. And so when you say in your book and in your bio, you say that you are giving voice to the psychological impact of incarceration. Can you explain what that means?
Sure. Given voices because no one was talking about this. And I could not understand after, God had led me to Google, can a boy become a man in prison? And that's just a metaphor. But after finding that information and Kevin acknowledging that this is what he was going through, I was like, excuse me, I was like, why isn't anybody talking about this? So this is what I mean when I say I give voice to the psychological impact of incarceration and to what you said about your what your son said. And as I often tell people, your loved one will never ever tell you everything that they have seen in prison, that they have endured in prison. But best believe that those things that they've seen, heard, it stays with them. And this is what I was explaining the other day, I often ask guys who have gotten out, what was it like going in? And the majority of them have said, I had to become someone I wasn't in order to survive. I had
Wow.
become, like Kevin said, I had to become this monster so
Yeah.
that I wouldn't be taken advantage of. So here it is. And this, I'm very visual. Uh, just imagine you have worn this mask for 20 years.
Yeah.
This mask, this tough guy, don't fool with me, or whatever. You've worn that mask for 20 years. And just because you come off out that back gate, some of those behaviors are still there, right?
Yes.
So you've worn a mask to survive prison. And then you come out, you got to put on another mask to survive society. So you're
Yes.
double masked. So I look at it like this person can't breathe. You got
Yeah.
you got all these
Yeah.
masks on you and you can't breathe. So that's why it's so important for people to understand. And I was ignorant to that fact too, that I didn't, asking question Kevin when we first connected, having a list of questions to ask him every
Yes.
time he talked to me, but there was one question I did not ask. I did not ask, did prison affect you? I
Yeah.
didn't ask that question, right? And so he and I did a live Tuesday night. And I asked him, I said, I never asked you that question. I said, had I asked you that question, would you have been like everyone else that says, oh, I'm good? I'm
Yeah.
good,
Yeah.
right? And he said, I probably would have said, I'm good, because they really don't know the magnitude of the impact of prison
Mm.
until they come out.
Yes. Yes.
Right? Yeah, yeah. So it's so and so important that family members understand, because those guys coming out that back gate, they're gonna be a part of the I'm good club.
Mm.
I'm
That's right.
good until different situations occur and responsibilities occur. Then they realize how they were affected by prison. Just this past Sunday, someone who has been out. 5 years, and he had been in several times. 5 years. He tell me he wants to go back to prison. He wants to go back. Anytime somebody says they wants to go back to prison, that's the issue. That's the
Yeah.
issue. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, that's an issue.
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
and I think these conversations are so important because we have people that, as loved ones, we're just so excited that they're coming home. And we're just, my baby's coming home, my son's coming home, my husband's coming home, my cousin. We're just excited. Eh, But they've been programmed, like you said, to be a whole different person. They have to do what they have to do to survive in there. There are system solutions that have been put in place that may not have been best for them, but they had to do what they had to do to survive.
yeah.
So the fact that we're talking about these things, and we need to know what we need to do to be ready for them when they come home. As I was reading your book, one of the things that really stood out for me and blessed me as you were sharing your husband's experience and the impact it had on your marriage was that your faith remained. And your faith is what carried you through that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, I can. Yeah, it was my faith that carried me through. But let me say something. We can be in faith, but that does not omit the pain,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
That does not omit the pain. And so it was my faith. I went through a whole lot. Still standing. I had faith. Like God showed me what's happening with Kevin, and He did. He did show me that. And so Kevin went to therapy. I went to therapy, and everything was fine, right? And I wrote the book. I published the book in 2019. 6 months after I published the book, Kevin had stopped going to therapy. And when he stopped going to therapy, those behaviors reoccurred. And this
Yeah.
time they were more aggressive.
Wow.
So this time I had to choose me.
Yeah.
I was in faith for my marriage. Show me. And he did. He did. But the second time around, I chose me. I didn't want me to go back through what I previously went through. But
Yeah.
the beauty of this is that Kevin, I don't call him my ex husband. Kevin is my friend who I was once married to. But let me
Okay.
tell you what did it. And this is for family members. This is for family members. Of course, I was upset with him. I was angry with him. How dare you come into my life and bring this chaos into my life? I was good before I got married. I was traveling and doing a whole lot
That's
of
right.
things. But it was when I understood trauma
Yeah. Yeah.
and the impact of trauma and what it did to him. Then I couldn't be mad at him no more.
Yeah.
It wasn't my call to say, well, that was 28 years ago. You need
Yeah.
to get over that. That ain't my call because we don't know the extent of how trauma affected them. So when I came to an understanding, and this is what family members need to do, we don't want to research nothing. We don't want to read nothing. We don't want to do nothing. But in order to understand, you're going to have to.
That's right.
Post incarceration syndrome is a monster,
Yes, ma'am.
right? And so many sit back and they think that they can fund these guys with their love.
Yeah.
You can't love him enough.
That's
You can't
powerful.
love him enough.
That's powerful. That's
Yeah,
powerful.
you can't. I love Kevin Bruno. You can't love him enough.
That's powerful. I just noticed that I put the wrong name under my picture, but everybody knows that I'm not Sheila Bruno. But I was also thinking about, and I do have your book here, and I want everyone that has anybody, you have a loved one who's incarcerated, you need to get this book because I tell you, there are some things that I thought I knew, but I found that I really didn't know anything.
Wow.
Um, when did you notice, how did you notice changes in your husband that you could connect back to his incarceration?
Um, I remember the very first day, I said, "You're changing on me." And I said, "Have I changed?" And he said, "No." But Kevin is a very kind person, loving, jokey kind of person.
Okay.
And all of that, it ceased. It ceased. He would be very isolated. He will come in and he would go into his office and he wouldn't um, talk. And Kevin's response to me was always, "I got you. I
Yeah.
got you." And I stopped getting the "I got yous." It changed. And so this is another thing that he and I talked about this week is I said that he changed instantly, kind of subtly. But this is the deal. The change had already occurred internally.
Right,
And
right,
then
right,
it just,
right.
you know what they say about that pressure in that pot, in
Yeah,
that
yeah,
pipe, right? So he had already began to change on the inside, but it became such a burden on the inside that it began to
yes.
surface on the outside. So it
Yeah, I
wasn't,
got you.
it was over a period of time. And that's what I call, suffering in silence. A lot of them
Yeah,
suffer in silence. This one guy eventually just committed suicide, right? Several people have gotten out and committed suicide because they suffered in silence for so long. And
yeah,
then the noise and the chatter in their
yes.
head, they can't silence this. And this is why a lot of people who didn't use drugs before they went to
That's
prison,
right.
but they come out or they started using drugs on the inside
On the
because they're
inside.
trying to silence the noise in their heads.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. My
yeah,
son
yeah,
said to me, he said, Mom, think about every day you walking past a cell um, and you see a person hanging from their bunk with from a sheet, or you walking down a tier and you look down and you see blood flowing out into the hallway where somebody has cut themselves, killed themselves.
yeah,
Imagine what that does to you over a period of years. And
yeah,
then you can't even verbalize
yeah,
what it is because they want to just put you on pills, which really doesn't help all the time. He said, but then there's people who he was talking, we were on the phone last night, and he said, it's like the walking dead in here. He said, I'm sitting here now and I'm looking at a brother does not know we're about to fall out of the chair. He's so high.
yeah,
And that's
yeah,
what he does every day. He said, but
yeah,
that's how he deals with it. And
yeah,
so you let that person go. And a lot of times, this is one of the things that bothers me, Sheila, is once people go to prison for whatever reason, whether they're guilty, innocent, whether it was a violent crime, nonviolent crime, whatever the case may be, too many people write people off and cease to see them as human beings.
mm-hmm,
And a large portion of those people are going to be coming home. They're
mm-hmm,
going to be returning to our society, to our communities. We need to be prepared for the return. And
yes,
this is what I really wanted, why I've been wanting to talk with you, because how do we get prepared? I mean, like, I know you said something in your book that was really important to me. You talked about arrested development.
mm-hmm,
And I had a brother who also was incarcerated. He's deceased now. And he was like maybe 19 when he went to prison. I mean, he was gone for like, I want to say 10 years. And when he came home, he was just still really doing like immature things. And my dad said, he is still the same age he was when he went to prison, mentally.
yeah,
And it took me a while to process that.
yeah,
So, can
yeah.
you just talk a little bit about the arrested development and then share with us some things that we should be doing to prepare ourselves?
Okay, so yeah, so I learned actually it was Kevin's mom because Kevin did something and I was like, who does that? And yeah, and she confided and she told me she said, don't tell him I told you. She said, but Google arrested development. And so arrested development is when the psychological development of our brain is incomplete at the time that we've suffered some type of trauma, right? So you get stuck and then going into prison at 19, at 15, you've never had an adult relationship. You've never matured in that part of your brain. So many wives have said, it's like I got another child, you
Right,
know?
right.
And so that's what it is. And people don't understand that because they don't take the time to read. But yeah, you have men who are 40, 50 years old coming out and they behave as though they're 20, as though they're 17 or whatever. And that's because the psychological portion of their brain is underdeveloped. So yeah, yeah, yeah,
Wow.
that's a lot, and it's so much. But I'll share this with you. Uh, I I just said to God the other day, I'm tired, and I said I've been on this journey for 6 years, and
Yeah.
my message has reached over 100,000 people.
Yes.
Uh, 2 different countries. I'll be going to Alaska in September to have this same conversation, right? But in June, I had the opportunity to speak before the Department of Corrections in Las Vegas.
Okay.
And at the end, one guy said, what's the solution? And that stuck with me and that bothered me, right? And that's why I said, God, I'm tired. I'm kind of tired of saying the same thing. I am result driven. I'm result
Right,
driven.
right, right,
So
right.
I said just Tuesday, I put my private group on pause because my thing is this. Okay, God, you revealed this because you are definitely concerned about those who are incarcerated. Now
Yes.
I need you to tell me what's next,
Right, 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 right.
right? But I have recently had some psychologists and reach out to me, some associate professor in criminology. These people are reaching out to me. I'm like, y'all got all the alphabets behind y'all now. Yeah, yeah. And so I think the next step is that I am going to have a conversation with them, right? But not without the experts, and the experts are the guys who have been to prison and who have been
Yeah.
out. And so we're going to come up with something because uh, I'm like, God, what's next? What's
Right,
next?
right,
I've been
right.
knocking on doors. People turn a blind eye to this conversation as it doesn't matter, like it does not matter. People think just getting them the job is the answer. That's not the answer. But you know what? We as family members, and this is why I hold the family members accountable. We as family members have to get this message to our loved ones on the inside. Because
Yes.
the Department of Correction ain't gonna sit there and tell you, yeah, prison mess you up. They're not
That's
gonna
right.
tell you that. But we
That's
as
right.
family members, my book, I donated to 17 prisons, 17 states, to a prison in 17 states. My goal was to put a book in every prison in the
Every
US.
prison.
Completed 17 states. Self-funded. Self-funded.
Yeah,
Right now, I have my books for free. Just
that's
seven
correct.
ninety nine. Seven ninety
That's
nine.
correct
Ship
for
it and
shipping.
handle it. And my
That's
thing
right.
is this too. I had to stop people from just in my ear 3 4 times, taking their calls. And I'm like, if I'm
Yeah.
talking and you ain't listening while I'm talking, I'm not going to
Right,
continue to
right,
say the same thing. Give
right.
your loved ones, send them a copy of this book.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I've had guys on the inside who wrote me after reading the book saying, thank you for writing your book. I now understand. One guy even said, maybe if I had this is my fourth time in prison. It maybe if I had this information early on, my wife will still be alive.
Yeah. Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So we as family members, we tend to want to sit back and think he's going to be the same person that's in the visitation room, the same person that's on the
Right, right,
telephone.
right.
You are up for a rude awakening. And I'm
That's right.
trying to wake you. I'm trying
That's
to
right.
wake you. Yeah.
Wake you up. Wake you up.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Trying to wake you up. Trying to wake you
Right.
up. Yeah. Yeah.
That's powerful. And before we run out of time, I wanted to have you discuss also when we're talking about the impact of incarceration on individuals. And you mentioned in your book, we talked about in the solitary confinement, the inability to interact with other human beings. That's one of my things. And maybe you and I could talk about this, another time when you have more time. But I've been reaching out to some of my state officials, elected
Mhm.
officials, who are elected to do what you need them to do, but getting a response from them is a whole nother thing,
Yeah.
because I'm concerned about inmate advocacy, and I've tried, and it's hard to do it by yourself.
Yeah.
Uh, and I've tried to, I've written emails with lists of things that I think that should be addressed, and no response. But
Yeah.
um, the solitary confinement, the excessive lockdowns, it, like human beings are not meant to be locked into uh, concrete blocks the size of bathrooms in the first place. But then you put them in there with a person they don't know, so now they got even less space. And
Yeah.
then whatever reason, they're on lockdown in these prisons continually. Continue every time you turn around, there's a lockdown. Not just because the individual did anything, but because the whole prison is locked down. How can
Mm-hmm.
that affect you emotionally?
So I just last week, a couple of weeks ago, maybe a couple, yeah, not even 2 weeks, um, someone very close to me just got out of solitary confinement, 365 days.
Oh my God.
And when he called me, I just let him talk. And that's another thing. Just let them talk. Because if you let them talk, you will hear the pain. You
Yes.
will hear you, their mental state will speak to you. And
Yes.
he said to me, and he just talked. He talked and I listened. He said, within that year, he said, I had 3 different cellies. He said, one of them was full blown schizophrenia. He said he would talk to another person, he would fight with this person. He said, so I didn't get any sleep because I didn't know what he was going to do. He said, finally, I just kept saying, let me out of here, let me out of here, right? 365 days in a cell. What did you think you was going to accomplish? Where is the
Right.
rehabilitation in that? That's nothing
Exactly.
but rehabilitation right there at its finest.
Absolutely.
I heard
Absolutely.
one guy said I was in solitary confinement for 24 and a half years. He said,
Wow.
when I left prison, I left from solitary confinement back to the streets. I left, one lady said, my husband, and she didn't understand, doesn't sleep with me. He's been out 3 years. He sleeps on the sofa because he's not used to sleeping with anybody. And he shared with her just the touch, just to have somebody touch you. He said, and I'm scared that, if I roll over, if you roll over and touch me, then I might do something to you.
Right. 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 That's
Right?
right.
So, and one guy confided he was in there for 19 months. He said, while I was in solitary confinement, he said, mentally I became unraveled. He said, so much so I could not quieten the noise in my head. He said, and when the guards would come, he said, they would terrorize me. He said, they will give me a book, but the pages were torn out. So I couldn't really read it. So when he got out, he got on dope. And
Yeah.
when one marijuana wouldn't quiet the noise, he went to cocaine. When cocaine and marijuana wouldn't quiet the noise, he went to heroin. So much so that for 6 days in the boarding house, they smelled something every time they walked past his room. 6 days till somebody finally got the manager to open the door and he had OD'd,
Oh my
trying to
God.
quieten the noise in his head.
Wow.
God, you know what you know what I said? I mean, I literally said, this is my last live. I said that as I was getting dressed. But every time I talk about it,
Yeah.
it's like Sheila. And then I had a message today. She said, I went to your group and I said,
Something is happening with the Wi-Fi. Wow. Okay, while we're waiting for this Wi-Fi situation to get fixed, I want those of you who are listening and those of you that will watch the replay to really understand. I mean, I know it's easy if you don't have a loved one that's in prison, you probably could care less what's happening to them. Many people have the attitude, well, they committed a crime, whatever happens to them, happens to them. But each one of those people is somebody, they have family and they have people that love them. And because of the work that we do, we just absolutely are not going to just ignore these people and pretend like we don't know that they exist. And I was listening as Miss Sheila was talking. Those of us who advocate for persons who are incarcerated or who have been incarcerated, it's a heavy work. It's not. It's not for the weak. It's not for people just trying to be seen and be heard and trying to be a superstar. There is a lot of soul work that has to be done to do this. And I feel Miss Sheila's heaviness and her pain with regard to, because you're not only carrying your burden for the people, you're carrying their burdens as well.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely going to be praying with you. And I want to say to you, as I said earlier, that I would love for us to just have a conversation. Maybe you can give me some suggestions, um, advice on what I need to do, because, I really have a burden for the families of those who are incarcerated. And I just feel like sometimes I'm got beating my head on the wall because people are just not responding. Um, they'll inbox me with their concerns with their loved ones, but when it comes time to speak out, to
Yeah.
share, like they disappear.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the same thing that I see as well. And I have been saying, I'm only one body, you know. And when I go and speak, I am sharing not only my story, but I'm sharing everybody else's story. And the thing about it is, family members would be so surprised because I have people who have returned from prison saying, I want to come on your platform and I want to talk. I want to talk about this, keep talking about this. Family members got to get out of their own way. They got to
Yeah,
get out of their own way. And like I told them, you can't keep bending my ear.
right.
You can't keep bending my ear. You have to be willing. This has not just happened to Sheila and to Jasmina, right? You have to be willing to say how it has affected you. As I was saying when we got disconnected, I got a message from a lady that says, I see you pause your private group. She said, I need to talk to somebody. Who can I talk to about this? But until we collectively come together and
Yes.
just refuse to be silent, then maybe somebody is hearing me. Then
Yes.
they will hear. But a lot of them have not experienced it because they don't have a loved one in prison. So those who have, those who have the power, so associated be that can do something about it. Well, it
Yeah.
hadn't come to my house yet, so I don't even have to worry about
Exactly. Exactly.
it.
Because
It ain't my
and I
child. Yeah.
yeah, and it's like, oh well, they committed a crime, so well,
Mhm.
good for them, or because it's not their child, it's not their husband, it's not their cousin, it's not somebody they know. And even our elected officials, while they say that they want, they're concerned about all the needs of all the people in the state, they really are not concerned about
Yeah.
those people in that
Yeah.
concrete plantation. And
Yeah.
so I'm
Yeah.
presenting to you as a family member that this is some things that I think would make things easier. Even with regard to how you run in these prisons, you have less riots and fights and whatever if you would just listen, but they
Yeah.
don't respond.
Yeah, and the thing about it also is, and it just gets me, a lot of times when they're sentenced to prison, they've been told, I'm sending you away because you're a threat to society, but you sent them out back in a worse condition than they were
That's
before
right.
they went in, right?
Now they're
And
more
let
of
me
a
tell
threat.
you something, another thing is, a lot of people in corrections, they really, and they don't even understand that the trauma that they see and deal with, it vicariously attaches itself to them.
Right.
I've
Right.
had parole officers, supervisors, just said, I didn't know this. Just in April when I spoke, the parole officer said, you have changed the way that I interact with my clients.
Wow.
She said, I had no idea. She said, but you have changed the way that I interact with my clients.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
That's powerful because they see them just as criminals, as heathens, uh, thugs, and the dredge of society. Because when you tell a 25-year-old young man, I'm giving you 50 years for basically what you're saying is, we don't want anything else to do with you. Your life is over.
Yeah.
And so, first of all, the fact that one person even has that kind of power is something else that really irritates me, but that's a whole nother conversation. Um, but while they're there, like you said, they're not the only ones being impacted. The families are being impacted. The guards are being impacted. They have to deal with them every day. Um, it's just a lot. And it just
Wow.
hurts me to know that there are people in those situations who are being mistreated because they're still human beings and they still have
Yeah.
rights.
Yeah.
And it just really disturbs me. So
Yeah. They
I
don't
just
do.
really, really wanted to talk to you tonight. I know we, running out of time, but I just thank you so much for sharing your heart with me. I can feel your heart, your spirit, your burden. I will definitely be praying for you um,
Thank you.
as you go to the next step, whatever that may be. But don't quit. Don't quit on us. We need you.
You know what? I actually, I just need to, because someone asked me, said, you hear so much, you hear so much. What do you do for yourself? How do you take care of yourself mentally? And I know when it's time to step back. And it
Yes.
doesn't mean that I step out. I just need to
Yes.
step back. And
I
so
understand.
after the Alaska trip, I'm just going to just sit still, because
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, God, over 100,000 people, internationally, and spoke on this subject internationally. I need to know what's next.
Yes.
What's
Yes.
next? Because it has
Absolutely.
to be a next. He just didn't give me this and drop this in my spirit to do this, because I'm an introvert. And for me to be out here talking about all that,
Yeah.
totally out of my element. But God
Yeah.
has graced me and appointed me to do this. I have no doubt, but I can't quit, because this is something He's given me. But, however, I have sense enough to know, okay, God, what's next?
Yeah.
Show me what's next.
That's
Show me
right.
what's
Right.
next. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
Miss Sheila, I'm going to let you go so you can get
Okay,
some rest, hopefully, for the rest of the evening. Can you
oh,
just give the audience contact information and
sure.
how they can purchase your book?
Sure. You can go to my website, www.wifeafterprison.org. There's a lot of content, a lot of content. My thing is this: ignorance is expensive. It's
Yes.
really expensive. It cost me my marriage, right? And so get the information, right? And
Yes.
this is why I continue to do the lives, and we break post incarceration down. We talk about the five disorders that makes up the post incarceration syndrome. We talk about the behaviors. We show you the behaviors. So when your loved ones come home and you see these behaviors, you won't be like, well, why are you doing that? Because you
Right.
understand. You understand. And
Yes.
sometimes they think just because their loved ones got 5 more years, baby, it's going to take you 5, 10 years just to adjust.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Get the
That's right.
information. Get the information. Seek to understand, not deny. Prison has side effects.
Absolutely. Wow. Okay. Thank you so much, Miss Sheila. Again, I appreciate you taking
Uh,
time out of your schedule to talk with me tonight. And after you get some rest, and take care of you first. Then we will have a conversation and I will tell you what I'm trying to do, and maybe you can tell me how to do it better.
Okay. All right.
Right.
Well,
Right.
thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you, Jasmine. Take
I
care.
appreciate you. I love you. God
Love
bless.
you too. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.